Hello and welcome to the channel. For today's video, we're actually going to be doing a bit of a techie thing. Now, as you see on the screen before you, I have two instances of OBS. The plan here today is to kind of show you my way, how I handle trying to do everything with one machine. Specifically, we are recording one screen while being able to portray it in two different ways. So we have our recording right now with the face cam, and we actually have the stream, with no, well, you can't see that, but there's no face cam on the stream here. Normally I would have these backwards. Of course, the stream would have the camera, the recording would not. Now, to accomplish this without frame drop is actually kind of difficult. So to kind of prove the point a little bit more, we also have at our disposal precision to show the activity on the GPUs. You see GPU activity, that is the recording process. We will get into that. And then hardware monitor IQ, just for temps and things to kind of show. And then I also have Task Manager at the ready to kind of show what everything is doing here. First, let's start with specs. Actually, I can bring that back. Actually, first let's start with would I recommend this setup to try and do this with one computer when most people, almost all of them, would recommend two computers. I know I keep looking down at the screen. No, I would not recommend this. It works if you already have the hardware as a way to save money from needing to buy more hardware, but it is not the easiest thing in the world to set up, and it requires a lot of tweaking, and quite frankly, to do it on a single system, it requires quite a bit of performance. You can actually see right now that one of my cores on my 9900K running at 4.9, and now it says 4.9 instead of 4.89, it's completely loaded up. And now it's not. Anyways, so we are running an i9 9900K on an Asus Z390 Prime A board with 32 gigs of Corsair Vengeance memory. Running at 3100 megahertz, I can't get 32 to work. Also, we have a Gigabyte Aorus 1080 Ti Extreme Edition, an EVGA GTX 980 SC, and then of course the included or iGPU integrated HD 630 or UHD 630. Drives, irrelevant. As long as you have some SSDs, this will work. So I'm going to explain the workflow here, how all this is actually coming together, and then why I made the certain decisions I did. The reason I'm making this video isn't necessarily a how-to, but to show that it is capable, and because I can't seem to find all this information in one place. So the issue is that with a normal single system setup, you would do an internal recording. You would either use the encoder on the GPU, or you would use your CPU to encode frames grabbed directly from the frame buffer of the rendering GPU. In this case, the 1080 Ti. The problem with that is that if you load up the GPU to 100%, you lose frames. It'll drop dramatically, and anyone who's done this knows what I mean. Even if you have everything capped at 60% or 60 FPS, when it hits 100%, you'll get frame drops, you know, say 55 in game, and then all of a sudden OBS is reporting back like 45 FPS. So first things first, watch this number here and this number here, the 260s. Okay, we're going to take Unigen here. I'm going to run 1080p, ultra quality, no VSync, 8 times anti-aliasing, 1080p. That should stifle the card pretty good. All right, we have it running. We're at right around 180 FPS. I think on some of the scenes, it'll jump up to about 200 FPS. You've probably noticed that the entire video isn't completely glitching out. But to prove a point, here we are. The red line is the 1080 Ti. We are sitting at the 98-99% full load. And if we bring up our OBS. Now, OBS is currently recording, obviously. You can see it's recording here, and you're watching the recording, so clearly it's recording. But now we're going to add in a snake to the oil here. We're going to start the stream. Now, this is my Twitch setup. I do have it already set to bandwidth test mode, so we're going to start the stream as well. Yes, I know. There we go. Little hesitation as it starts. Now we're back at 60. How? Alright. There is a capture card involved, but I know that a lot of people are going to say even with a capture card. And then, of course, I'm getting frame drop, but that's because of my network. For some reason, my connection to either their Houston or DFW server, because I am in South Texas, seems to give me issues. Even though it says I'm fine here, it'll pick up. The first time I tried this, my modem was overheating, so you're not going to be able to see that. But if you watched the last Hunter Call the Wild video highlight of the stream, then you know that it's air-cooled. Alright, so everything looks pretty well loaded up. Let's go through the workflow. So my game, in this case being represented by Unigine Heaven, is being rendered on my 1080 Ti. The 1080 Ti, I have set everything up in such a way that nothing uses the 1080 Ti. Absolutely nothing. That includes going to, you go to your search bar here and just do graphics settings. And I have set Precision X1 and IQ because they use DirectX rendering to do their graphs. And I've set them to the power saving mode, which means they're going to utilize the iGPU instead of the 1080 Ti. So even these are not running on the 1080 Ti. So the game is being rendered on the 1080 Ti. Every drop of horsepower it has is for the game. Cool. 1440p pass-through is now going on to the Elgato 4K 60 capture card, where it is then rendered into 2 scenes. This is being done by having there we go, multi-allow and the OpenGL command lines inserted in the launch here. And what that allows for is, one, the multi allows for multiple instances. We have 2 instances here. Open one, then open the other, warning label comes up, launch anyway, you're good to go. Then I created 2 profiles, one for streaming, one for recording. One goes on one monitor, the other goes on the other monitor. By setting it to OpenGL would normally be CPU bound, but I set it to OpenGL and then went into the NVIDIA control panel, manage 3D settings, and here, OpenGL rendering GPU. I set that to be my GTX 980. Now this, my main monitor, the one that runs the game, is plugged into the 1080 Ti. My 2 side 1080p monitors are plugged into the 980, and then I just went through the BIOS and made sure to enable the iGPU even if it doesn't detect a monitor. Because on this motherboard, it was actually disabling it if there was no monitor, but there is a setting in the configuration on the BIOS to adjust that. So what has that done? By making sure that this is, now we have set OpenGL rendering for these, done through the advanced settings here. So I took it off DirectX, put it to OpenGL. And then I told NVIDIA that I want OpenGL to be rendered on the 980. Why do that? Well, because even if you have your encoder set to not be on your rendering graphics card, these scenes still have to be rendered. When you look at your stats here and it says frames missed due to rendering lag, right here you see I got 0.1%. That's about all I ever see, is 0.1%. I do miss a few. A lot of it has to do right now with the fact that I have the OBS windows on this screen. If I removed them, it would go away, but then I can't show you that because it wouldn't be on the screen. Anyways, so when it says rendering lag, it's not talking about the game being rendered. It has to compile the scene. It has to put everything together as you want it in the base canvas resolution before it can be processed for encoding. So when you get rendering lag, it's talking about your rendering. If you just simply have a single GPU and you go into your settings here and you just go to output recording and set it here to NVEC and then just continue on there. And then of course down here it says GPU 1 because when you set it to NVIDIA, it's starting 0 at the first NVIDIA GPU. So even though I have 3, it's technically the second one, not the third one, but then Task Manager sees it as 3. So even though you go through and you set all that, it still has to compile the scenes. And so if you have it set to Direct 3D, it's going to go with the first Direct 3D device, which OBS standard is to set that to the high performance device. Now, if you have an iGPU, you can take the rendering option right off your main GPU by simply setting it to power saving mode, and then it'll utilize the iGPU. The downside is that the Windows ability, so again, if we go back to me learning how to spell, nope, yep, there we go. This options window right here, it does not understand the difference that there's multiple PCIe. It simply identifies high performance as being any dedicated GPU and power saving being any integrated. When it goes and looks at your dedicated GPU, it goes for the one that is connected to your primary display. So when you did your multi-display setup, whichever one is listed as primary display. So if I set this to high performance, it's going to go 1080 Ti. I don't want that either. So we have to use OpenGL. We have to let it go to high performance mode, and then the NVIDIA driver will correct it and going, no, you're not using the 1080 Ti, you're going to use the 980. So now we have the rendering of the frames for these two instances off. Now, because I'm using a capture card, and I believe because I'm using a capture card, someone was, I was reading somewhere, someone was saying that you couldn't do this because it would be source locked. Okay. I have no, that might have been if they were capturing from within a graphics card, which makes sense because then you're frame grabbing from the frame buffer, not an actual capture device. So anyways, I have no problems with that. Now the camera on the other hand, this thing right here, that is source locked. So once, if I bring it up here, it can't be over here. That's why it's on this one and not this one. Although normally I would have it reversed. Now for the actual encoding. Now we have our scenes rendered. This is what we want. Now we need to send them back out. For my recording, I like 1440p, and I do everything in 1440p because this is a small channel. So YouTube has this thing where it will, if you're running 1080p in your small channel, you get a low-end encoder. You get a higher-end encoder and therefore a sharper image if you go to 1440p. So render in 1440, render in 1440, record in 1440, edit in 1440, final render in 1440, upload in 1440, yada, yada, yada. I'm using a variable bitrate. I am doing, I think I have it set to 50 to 75 or 50 to 70, but this will occasionally jump up to like 110. Right now it's really low because the majority of the screen isn't even the moving stuff. If I were to sit there and click this and bring it to the forefront, if I were to remember buttons, let's take it down here, then click this. Yeah, right there, boom, 100 megabit. The average render lag here, how it says, this normally actually sits down in like 3 to 7 milliseconds. Again, the reason it's reading so high right now is because I have the OBS windows on this display, which is giving a bit of a loopback issue, I guess. I'm not exactly sure. But it does go away when I have them off on their normal monitors. So that's my recording, that's being stored to a drive, that's set. And for my GPU, I am using the 980, which is number 1, because it starts counting at 0, and depending on what you pick as encoder, it starts counting from the first GPU of that variety. So since I picked NVIDIA, it went, okay, 1080 Ti is 0, 980 is 1, so I want GT1. Now if we hop over to precision, we can see the yellow line is the 980, the red line is the 1080 Ti. So here we can see that the 980 is under about 67 to 70% rendering the two 1440p scenes, because both canvases are 1440, and then the encoder is under 45 to 50% load recording one 1440p scene. Now for streaming, I wanted a, of course, a different setting because they are not going to be able to take a 100 megabit connection. So for that, I'm using the quick sync or the iGPU, which can be seen here. And I'm using I'm having it rescale the output to 1080p, balanced high to for constant bitrate, and 55. Twitch will take 6,000, but if you've been watching this number at all down here, it jumps around a lot. And I have seen it, when I set it 6,000, it'll jump up to like 8, and then everything really lags out. This seems to be, even right there, that was 72. So this seems to be about a good balance, at least with whatever network issue I'm having. It is outside. Port forwarding, bandwidth prioritization, everything has been set up on my end. There is nothing more I can do. But I live in a small town, so who knows? There's a construction worker out there hammering on a damn line, and the line is probably broken, severed, and they're trying to call someone. Meanwhile, I'm laid over to a freaking phone line that's probably strung through some bushes somewhere. I don't have problems with my ISP. I don't know what you're talking about. So we're using the iGPU to decode that. What this means is that whenever I launch a game, I do not have to worry about, oh dear God, it's overloaded everything. I do have to worry about the fact that it takes some CPU power. I know it says 50%, that's not a lot, but if you look at the core utilization, only using 8 threads. And those 8 threads are loaded. This one here is always super loaded, but it can do it. And on top of that, again, I am getting the absolute maximum performance out of this 1080 Ti I can without any hurt. This is all single system. Back to square one. Would I recommend doing this? No. I had the 980 lying around. The capture card I did buy because I thought I was gonna build another system to be a stream computer, but then I bricked that motherboard. Always verify supported CPU list before doing BIOS flashbacks, because if you don't have a CPU that works on the BIOS you flash back to, whoops. Lastly, another downside to this setup is I can't use hotkeys. Because normally I would have it set up with hotkeys to start, stop stream, start, stop recording, and also pause recordings. This is already a 7 gig file. 21 minutes of recording, this is already a 7 gig file. And there's nothing going on. So I would normally like to be able to pause the recording here and then restart it. I normally do that with a hotkey. I can't do that because if you watch this here and this one here, what you'll see is that a single hotkey action works on both. Wee bit of a problem. This works wonderfully in games. I run all my games in windowed mode. This allows me to very easily, just go off screen and mess with chat or mess with anything else. Small channel, I know. A lot of people are going, what chat? Hopes, dreams, aspirations. I seem to have read in a lot of places, again, the reason I'm doing this video isn't necessarily to saying, hey, here's your solution, but I know there's a lot of people out there who ask how to get this software to behave like this, how to get this kind of reaction. It is one physical computer. You've seen it. Oh, you haven't seen the computer, but you see here that it's all happening here. Did Unigine just crash? Oh. I've been noticing it has very weird focus behavior. Even though I don't have focus turned on, that sometimes it'll, I don't know, it pauses itself. But so here now we have everything on screen. You can see CPU usage here. You can see all the 3 GPUs here. You can see everything working down here, everything working down here. And the game's still running at almost 200 FPS. It works. Single system setup. I have scene switching if I want. Bye. Hello. Ah. Go away, go away. It still works, no hesitations. It has even less, like this number here, having this many missed frames. I don't have that when I have them off to the side. That's purely because I have everything on one monitor. This is not for a light duty system. Again, 9900K, 1080 Ti, and a 980. That 980 struggles. Like 66% doesn't seem like much of a load, but again, this isn't a full picture deal going on here. When it is a full picture, it sits up about 85%, because in mind, the 980 is actually rendering not just 2 desktop displays with Windows Desktop Manager, but it is rendering 2 1440p scenes. That's a lot for a 980, because in the time of the 980, 1080p was perfect. No one was running 1440p on a 980. So that's a little bit above. If I were to make an upgrade to, I believe that software-wise, this would work. That if I could change my 1080 Ti out for an RTX 2080 Ti, perhaps even need 2 of them. I'd have to change my motherboard then, but that's for motherboard reasons, not enough slots or PCIe lanes. But I could do 4K, I could do 4K pass-through, and I could bump the 1080 Ti down to take the 980's position and do 4K. If my ISP had better upload bandwidth, I could potentially still stream in even 4K. I couldn't stream in 4K because I'm using the UHD 630, and I don't think it could handle 4K. It might. I don't think it can. It probably can't. It would probably lag out. I'm almost willing to bet it would lag out trying to encode a 4K picture. Again, this is just a proof of concept. Everywhere when I was doing research for this little project, I was reading that people were saying it's impossible. If the GPU overloads, the GPU overloads. There is no way around that. And there's no way to make this work on one system. Some people were saying it would be impractical. I agree, it's not very practical. But again, if you already have the stuff lying around, I mean, this is a one machine solution. Now granted, where I would have to do some testing is like specific Twitch stuff, overlays and all that stuff on how it would impact rendering. I imagine it would be a lot more on rendering, especially if you're one of those people that would have the chat flowing. But I don't think it would be that much of an impact. It would probably be enough to take up what little bit the 980 has left to offer. But as long as I'm staying with a stream of 1080p, it should work. So questions, comments, concerns, comment down below. If you have any other questions about how this works or more detailed stuff, I know I left a lot of stuff out, but usually if you're searching for this kind of solution, you've already figured out the rest of it. As always, buttons to push. Until next time.